Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. Lindsay Taylor, PhD, is the senior writer and researcher at Primal Nutrition. She's been a consultant, editor, and recipe developer for several of Mark Sisson's bestseller books, and is co-author along with Sisson of the Keto Reset Instant Pot Cookbook and the Keto Reset Diet Cookbook. She's also co-author of her latest book, the Keto Passport Cookbook. An ultra runner and Ironman triathlete, Lindsay is an expert in preparing low-carb, nutrient-dense food to fuel her on and off the race course. Lindsay earned her PhD in social and personality psychology from UC Berkeley. She brings her expertise to bear on topics related to mindset, goal setting, and lifestyle change as a contributor to the Primal Blueprint and Primal Endurance podcasts, and as the founder and lead moderator of the Thriving Keto Reset and Primal Endurance communities on Facebook. She lives in North California with her husband and 2 boys, where she attempts to model a healthy, balanced approach to endurance training, work, and family. Find her healthy, colourful meal creations on Instagram, and we'll share all the details of how to find that. But firstly, welcome to the show, Lindsay.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Excellent. Look, it's a pleasure to have you on, and I'm super excited because of your endurance background as well. So I guess I'd like to just start by asking you, how did you get into endurance training, and then how did you find nutrition along the way, and how did they sort of help each other out?
Yeah, I honestly don't think I would be where I am in terms of the job I do or the kind of nutritional approach I've taken in the last 8 years if I had never started my endurance sports, because my husband and I kind of had started to adopt the primal paleo lifestyle about late 2000s, like around 11, 12 years ago when Mark originally published the Primal Blueprint. But I was kind of, half in, half out. Like, I got it. I cared about being healthy, but I was busy. I was still in grad school. I had my first baby while I was writing my dissertation, and I just didn't devote that much emotional or mental energy to the whole question of the kinds of foods I was putting in my body, besides kind of being sucked into a traditional diet culture a little bit. And it wasn't until about 8 years ago when I was pregnant with my second son, and I just got this idea that I was going to sign up for a triathlon. And I don't know where the idea came from. I don't know why I thought I could do it. There was nothing about me in the previous 30, 25 years of my life that made that seem like a reasonable goal. But that's kind of how I operate. I kind of jump into things and just assume they're going to work out. So I signed up for my first triathlon right after my second son was born, so 7 years ago. And I ended up training with a group at my local gym and a trainer there who runs a triathlon group. And I just loved the group so much, really, and made a bunch of new friends. And so although I intended to just do one triathlon and move on with my life, I just kept signing up for races. So I had a reason to hang out with all these ladies that I really liked. And so it was really when I started taking my training more seriously and just devoting a lot more time to my training that I really started to care about food as nutrition and food as fuel, because I started to feel like, well, I have 2 little kids, and I'm not a quote unquote serious athlete in the sense that I'm not competitive. I'm not particularly fast. I'm not good. But if I'm going to be spending all this time training and, asking my husband to watch the kids while I go out for a run or a bike or a swim, I at least want to be doing it in a way that I'm taking it seriously, in the sense that I want to be doing it in a way that's healthy. I want to be supporting myself through nutrition and through proper recovery and learning what that means. And so that's when I really started to dig into the kind of low carb approach, really went mentally and emotionally full-fledged into Primal at that time. This was before I knew about keto. And so it was really wanting to be a healthy athlete that got me into the space where I really embraced this way of eating.
Excellent. And for our listeners who haven't heard previous podcasts, I'll link to a couple in the show notes. And we've sort of discussed the difference between keto and paleo and what have you. But what I'd really like to talk to you about, Lindsay, is I guess touching upon keto and I was going to say the new diet keto, but it's actually a very old diet. It's just people have started to find out about it. But I guess I wanted to sort of start with, there seems to be a lot of controversy around keto at the moment. And I would love to ask how you're finding dealing with the haters and the negative press and what sorts of objections you're getting and how you're sort of overcoming those.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of hate directed at the keto diet right now. And some of it I get, and some of it I think is just like a pastime that people are using keto as just something to direct their negative energy towards. So, keto, like you mentioned, has been around in use for 100 years now as a treatment for childhood epilepsy. That's kind of what originally popularized it. And it's only been at least coming into my radar and kind of becoming popular in the last 5-ish years as more of a weight loss diet at first. And then now I think a lot more of us are trying to talk about it in terms of keto and the ways that keto can promote health. But because it became so popular so fast, and because a lot of people do focus on it just for quick weight loss, it's been really easy for the haters to brand keto as a fad diet. Much in the same way that, Atkins got branded as a fad diet, and then paleo got branded as a fad diet, and, Whole30 gets it too. And just anything that people really love, other people love to hate. But at the same time, there is an aspect of keto that kind of makes it easy to pick on, because there are lots of ways to do keto that on the face of them seem unhealthy. And that's part of the thing that I really try to educate people on, is that there really is no one keto diet. Any way of eating that lands you in a state of ketosis, meaning your liver is making ketones, counts as a ketogenic diet. And so the ketogenic diet in and of itself is agnostic to questions like food quality and how often you should be eating, and whether or not you can include, artificial sweeteners, and whether or not it matters, what types of fat you're eating. And there's also, pockets in the keto space that really advocate for just eating as much fat as possible and believing that that's what makes a diet ketogenic. So there's just a lot of infighting, there's a lot of outfighting, there's a lot of disagreement about what keto means. And then there's just also within the practitioners often a misunderstanding of kind of the basic science, which makes us like a really easy target to pick on.
That's interesting. And so basically what you're saying then, it's possible to do keto in a very unhealthy way.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I would definitely consider unhealthy, because obviously I come at this from a primal sensibility, which means that I do care very much about food quality. I do believe that there are fats and oils that are more health promoting, and that there's fats and oils that I avoid entirely in my diet. But the reason I make those types of food choices is because of my primal approach, not because of my keto approach per se. It's absolutely possible, and I see people doing this, where their version of a keto diet is, 4 hamburger patties with pats of butter on top of them, and butter coffee, and sugar-free Cool Whip, and this thing called fluff, which is like diet soda mixed with casein powder and whipped into a dessert. And you will end up in ketosis if you eat like that. But obviously, as a person who comes from a background where I want people to eat lots of plants and animals and look at your nutrient intake and mind your phytonutrients, that is not what I would personally consider a keto diet that's healthy for you. But is it a diet that achieves the goal of ketosis? It is. And that's why it can get so murky.
Yeah, that's a really great example. So for the people out there who maybe aren't scientists themselves, how do they navigate the science around all this?
I mean, that's a good question because technically you don't have to have a deep understanding of the science to make keto work. Certainly. I mean, it's absolutely possible to just find someone you trust and have them, make you a meal plan. There's plenty of keto meal plans out there. And just go about your business. But I do think that it's helpful to have a basic understanding only because, and this is my personal approach, I like to restrict the least amount that you need to achieve your goals. So although a ketogenic diet requires obviously like a fairly high degree of carbohydrate restriction, that's the main way to get into ketosis, is that you restrict your carbohydrates, which means that your liver burns through glycogen, which means that your insulin is also low, and then your liver starts producing ketones from fatty acids. Like that's the basic biochemical pathway. So I want personally to only restrict carbohydrates as much as I have to, because carbohydrates are also found in nuts and all the vegetables that I love to eat, and things like, beets and carrots and the kind of sweeter vegetables we know about, sweet potatoes, but also Brussels sprouts and cabbage and spinach and all those vegetables. So I want to be able to include as many of those as possible. So I think it's helpful to find a source of reliable, basic information just so that you don't, A, restrict more than you have to. And then B, it's really easy to get bogged down in the minutia and the infighting among people in the keto space who think that there are hard and fast rules when really probably, human metabolism is incredibly complex and there's lots more flexibility than a lot of people recognize. So, that's actually why Mark wrote the Keto Reset Diet book in the first place, was just to kind of offer a version of keto that's not as restrictive as other versions of keto, that encourages self-experimentation, that lays out the basic science without going too much into the weeds. So honestly, I think that reading the Keto Reset Diet is a great place to start. Coming and talking to me on Facebook and our group is a great place to start. Because I do think that this is an area where a basic understanding of the science is probably actually going to be liberating to you if you can manage to not get sucked into the minutia.
And Lindsay, interesting you mentioned there that you sort of want to have as many vegetables as you can, but staying in ketosis. Why is it so important? I mean, is it really important that you're in constant full ketosis all the time?
That's a great question. And I think it's more of a philosophical question, actually. So, I mean, there are people, if you're using ketosis for a medical reason, if you're using ketosis therapeutically to augment cancer treatment, or to alleviate the symptoms of multiple sclerosis, or if you have early onset Alzheimer's, or there's lots of medical applications for the ketogenic diet now that are actually really, really exciting. Those people probably do not want to mess around with dipping in and out of ketosis. But the average person who's just using ketosis for basic health and for longevity benefits, which is what describes me, or for weight loss, really don't need to be in ketosis all the time. It's really not important. There's no evidence that being in constant ketosis is more effective for any of those goals than dipping in and out of ketosis and allowing yourself to have a variety of different produce and, colorful vegetables, different nuts and seeds, occasionally, eating more, for example, like yogurt, right? Which can add up carbs really quickly, but, maybe the probiotics offset the benefits. And the thing is that I always try to remind people is that as long as all your choices are obviously not all, but like the majority of your choices make sense in terms of you understand why you want to include those foods in your diet, even if the reason is completely hedonistic, right? Like it's just like, oh, this is delicious and I just really wanted to eat it. I think that's a valid reason to choose a certain food, certainly. if you can say like, oh yes, like maybe this yogurt is going to knock me off ketosis for a little while, but also, the healthy fats are something I want. The probiotics are something I really want. And also I just felt like having this yogurt. Then we don't have a way of quantifying, the benefits of staying in ketosis are X and the benefits of eating this probiotic food are Y. And so I'm going to plug X and Y into an equation and, that'll spit out the right answer for me about whether or not I should eat it. And people really get stuck on those kinds of questions where they act like there's a clear right answer and they need to sniff it out. And there's just not. So for me, I feel like make food choices that feel right to you, but I wouldn't personally make staying in constant ketosis a criteria without a clear medical reason.
Interesting. I think a lot of people who do promote going into ketosis also say the same thing, that it's, it's good once in a while to go into it, but then it's not an everyday thing. Of course, maybe lowering the carbs in general might work, but then again, I guess from individual to individual, it varies.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also there is a section of the keto space that demonizes carbs, but all of my carbs, by and large, on an average day, come from my homemade kefir and from vegetables. So it's like, you're not going to convince me that those are things that I shouldn't have in my diet just because they contain carbohydrates.
Well, on the contrary, I'd say that you probably maybe should have some more of those vegetables.
Yeah, I eat as many as possible, and I don't measure my ketones anymore, so I honestly don't know if I'm in ketosis all the time. I very much assume I'm not. I think part of the misunderstanding too comes from the fact that people think that being in ketosis causes weight loss. So if your goal is to lose weight, which obviously really means lose body fat, but just talking in the parlance of how people actually speak about it, if your goal is to lose weight, then you have to be in ketosis, because being in ketosis is how you know that you're losing weight. And that is absolutely a complete misunderstanding of how it actually works. Being in ketosis, ketones are derived from fat. So if you are making ketones, if your liver is making ketones, that is a sign that fat is being metabolized. But it's usually, unless you've been fasting, the fat from your latest meal. So being in ketosis is a reflection of fat burning, but it doesn't necessarily reflect that you are burning body fat. B, it doesn't factor into the equation any body fat that is being stored. And C, it doesn't cause weight loss. And that is a fundamental misunderstanding, is that, the ketones somehow go in and, eat up the fat and chew up the fat. And that is absolutely not at all how it works.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the weight loss thing, because actually, I've heard a lot of stories recently about people getting fat on ketosis, on the keto diet, or alternatively, they go off the keto diet and then they get fat. And some of the arguments have been reason is because they're not used to being able to digest carbs like they used to be able to. Mm-hmm. What's your opinion around that?
I mean, first of all, it is absolutely possible to gain weight on the ketogenic diet. I mean, a keto diet, although it does keep your insulin levels are going to be overall lower, it doesn't, magically undo the laws of thermodynamics. And so calories do, in fact, still matter. It does obviously create a different environment that you're putting those calories into. And so, it does shift your metabolism, but it doesn't mean that you just have free reign to eat as much fat as you want. For people who are very, very overweight and insulin resistant, maybe they have really severe type 2 diabetes, at first, eating a ton of fat can actually still yield weight loss as the insulin resistance is resolving and as your body is still a larger body. But as your body becomes smaller and you become more insulin sensitive, you cannot just eat copious fat and continue to lose weight. It just doesn't work like that. Speaking to, going off the ketogenic diet, that one's a tricky one because it's really hard to know what people mean when they say that. I mean, if you go off a keto diet and go back to eating, a SAD diet, you're going to probably return to a more inflammatory state. Immediately, I should mention that when you go off a ketogenic diet, if you increase your carbs significantly, even if they're quote unquote healthy carbs, you will immediately gain a few pounds just because your glycogen tanks will top off, and with glycogens comes water. And so you will gain a few pounds immediately, and it's not fat, it's just water weight. So people often freak out because they are eating keto and they go on vacation, or they take a long weekend and they come back 3 pounds heavier. And it's like, you didn't gain 3 pounds of fat in 3 days. It's not physiologically possible. You did not do that. That's just water. But yes, I mean, returning to a quote unquote normal diet usually means they're returning to an unhealthy diet with inflammatory foods. And so it's hard to know, exactly what the reasoning would be then if people are gaining weight. It's really, as we all know, easy to eat a very hypocaloric diet when you are getting a lot of calories from, processed foods. So it's really easy to eat many, many more calories if you're going back to processed foods without realizing it, because people find protein and fat much more satiating. And so, one of the very valid hypotheses for why a ketogenic diet is so effective is because it suppresses appetite to some degree. And so you actually just eat fewer calories without feeling hungry. In terms of insulin resistance, yes, there is a phenomenon called physiological insulin resistance, which basically just says that if you do not eat carbs for a long time, that when you go back to eating carbs, then your body doesn't process them as well. And, there's some evidence for that. It's not something I get terribly worried about. Mostly because I do eat a diet where my carb intake kind of varies from day to day. I have seen I've talked to lots of people where they've severely restricted carbohydrates, like to less than 20 grams total per day for months and months and months, sometimes 18 months, 2 years even. And then their weight loss has been stalled for a long time. And then they try to add back some quote unquote healthy carbs, and the scale shoots up, 5 or 6 pounds pretty quickly. Is it possible? Yeah, I do think it's possible. I'm not sure that we know enough about it yet to say that even if that happens, that it's any kind of problem that's not resolved by just, staying the course, eating some more vegetables, eating some more sweet potatoes, and then theoretically, your body should right itself and it should be okay. But I think that's just another argument for, once you become keto adapted, not continuing to just super restrict without a clear reason for doing that.
Interesting. I'd also like to sort of talk to you a bit about, and we've touched on this already, the language around foods and this idea of good and bad foods. What are your thoughts around all of this?
I mean, I try never to use the terms good and bad around foods, although there are foods that I avoid outright. I mean, I do not eat, the processed things like Doritos and Cheetos, and I have as much as possible a zero tolerance policy for canola oil in my house. So there are foods I choose not to eat because I don't believe that they're healthy for me. But
some would argue that they're not really food either.
Right. I would argue that. But the thing is, it's hard because as a person who I really think about myself as an educator. That's how I frame what I do. And as an educator, what I really want to do is keep people open to new ideas and to learning. And I think that when you place value judgments on food, it does two things. I think it can have the effect of shutting people down and turning people off because they feel judged. And I think it also has the effect of creating guilt and shame around food choices, which is not motivating for people. I mean, it can be motivating in the moment, like in a specific, with regard to a specific decision, but kind of in a more gestalt way. You don't want your food choices to be driven by shame and guilt. And then this is also just kind of a personal thing for me, is that, I don't want to participate in a diet culture where people are being shamed and made to feel like their self-worth is being tied up in the quality of their food choices. I want to encourage people to make food choices that are centered around wanting to take care of themselves, wanting to live a full and healthy life, wanting to feel great, wanting to not be bogged down by symptoms of inflammatory diseases or autoimmune diseases. So I want to frame food as an act of self-care. I mean, I say this all the time in my groups. So insofar as I want people to be making choices that are, kind of in psychological terms, more like approach choices, right? So I want people to be moving towards the types of foods that are going to support their goals, as opposed to trying to avoid foods that are quote unquote bad for them. I don't want to be introducing this kind of highly valenced positive, negative language into it. I'd rather do more work to educate people about why some choices are going to be more likely to support their goals than others and frame it that way. But it takes longer and it takes a lot more words. So
I get it. So if people want to find out more and get educated by you, what Facebook group should they join?
Okay, so I run Mark's 2 Facebook groups. One that's related to the Keto Reset diet book. And so that one, if you just go on Facebook and you search Keto Reset, it should be, I hope, still the first one that pops up. And right now, if you're listening to this in kind of spring of 2019, right now the banner ad is a picture of me and Mark. So it's pretty easy to see. And we have about 30,000 people in there right now. So that's the correct one. And I'm in there literally every day, answering questions and posting things I think will be of interest to people. And then also, if for athletes, I also run our Primal Endurance group. So if you search for Primal Endurance, it'll be the only one that comes up. And then also, like you mentioned in the intro, I am on Instagram. So at The Useful Dish is my handle. I know you're going to link to that. I do prefer that if people have questions for me, they come and find me in the group, only because I like for people, if they feel comfortable, to ask questions more publicly, just because that way more people can get the answers. So, messaging me through Instagram is fine. But I'm not going to answer, really complex questions there because I can't provide personal coaching like that, but also because, my goal is to help as many people as possible.
Awesome. And Lindsay, can I ask, why did you write the Keto Passport cookbook?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because it's funny that a lot of keto people actually reject the idea of using recipes. They just want to eat meat and vegetables. And I think that's great. I think that's fine. Actually, that's how I eat most of the time. But the reason I wrote the Keto Passport is twofold. One is that my co-author, Layla, is someone I actually met through the Facebook group. Actually, I didn't know her before I started the Facebook group. And she was an early member, and she was posting all these amazing pictures of food. She's got an excellent food background herself, and she was just an all-around awesome person. So I just saw her as an untapped resource that I really needed to do something collaborative with. But then also, I see people burning out on keto a little bit because they're just like meat and vegetables, meat and vegetables, meat and vegetables. And at least in the US, the way the keto diet is portrayed is, lots of ribeye, lots of hamburgers wrapped in lettuce, and lots of salads and lots of eggs, right? And there's nothing wrong with those foods. I mean, that is how I eat probably 5 out of 7 days. But if you're coming from a place where food has always been a big part of your identity, either because you love to cook or because you come from a specific cultural background where food is really wrapped up in your culture and, maybe your childhood memories and, a critical part of your identity, going keto and seeing this simplistic keto lifestyle can actually be a bummer. It can be really sad. You feel like I have to give up these things I love and this critical part of my identity in order to do this thing that I think is good for my health. And so Layla and I really wanted to show that, no, that's not necessary at all. So if you want to continue to make beautiful, delicious food, if you want to continue to make foods from your culture, your family heritage recipes, that it's absolutely possible. And a lot of the recipes in our cookbook, we actually didn't have to do very much, if anything, to them to make them keto. We just curated recipes and said, look, these traditional recipes from these different cultures are basically already keto. And then a lot of them we just had to make minor tweaks to. And then some of them we had to change pretty significantly, obviously things that are based on rice or that usually contain flour. But we wanted to give people the option and get them excited about, foods of different cultures, foods they remember from their travels, foods they remember from their childhoods, and to kind of counter the message that keto food is repetitive and boring, when in fact, keto food can be, as exciting as your quote unquote normal food, although you have to be a little bit more creative because you're obviously working with a restricted list of, approved ingredients.
Can you give us an example of one of the more popular dishes that you had to maybe change quite significantly?
Well, so we have several recipes that are based on rice. So like my favorite is probably the jollof rice, which is an African dish, but also Layla wrote a really cool recipe for omu rice, which is a Japanese kind of rice. I guess it's hard to describe. It's kind of like a rice omelet, I guess. That one we had to change pretty significantly to accommodate, obviously a lot of them are now based on cauliflower. But that's the other thing is like cauliflower rice is such a huge ingredient now and it gets so boring, right? So, that one, those two were actually pretty easy. Oh, and we also have a recipe in there for dolmas, which are, like the rice stuffed grape leaves, which again, we were able to make pretty successfully with cauliflower rice. But a lot of them were just, reminding people that if you are creative with your cooking techniques and you're creative with your ingredients and your herbs and your spices, it's really easy to eat keto. And you could serve these dishes to people and not even tell them they're keto and people would never know.
Yeah, exactly. Are there any desserts in the book? I haven't actually seen it myself. So
this book, we did not include desserts because she and I just don't really eat desserts. We have one that's, and I honestly not sure I'm saying it right, but it's palacinki, which is like, it's a Polish pancake, sort of like a crepe. And we have one that's like a strawberry cream cheese palacinki. And I really apologize because I'm probably saying that completely wrong. So that's probably the closest to our dessert. My other two cookbooks, the Keto Reset Diet cookbooks, do have desserts in them. But honestly, I feel like, you've probably seen this with the Primal Paleo and with the Keto, that there are tons of blogs devoted to trying to make desserts and sweets.
That's why I asked, actually, because it's quite refreshing to find one that doesn't have desserts and concentrates on actual meals.
Yeah, the Keto Passport's all actual meals. And the Keto Reset Diet cookbooks, the Instant Pot and then the companion cookbook, have a very minimal dessert section for the same thing. I mean, this was kind of me just putting my foot down and saying, these aren't the type of recipes I'm interested in writing. Awesome. Other people are doing it and they're happy doing it. And that's not how I choose to eat. And those aren't the types of recipes I choose to write. So.
And Lindsay, where's the best place to go to find out more about the Keto Passport cookbook?
So like I said, you can find me on Facebook if you want to ask questions about it. And then our website is just ketoreset.com to find the Keto Reset books.
Okay, excellent. And then can they buy those on Amazon as well, I'm assuming?
Yep. Amazon is the best place to get the Keto Passport book. Also Barnes & Noble. The Keto Reset cookbooks are available in Target as well. And pretty much, they're pretty much available anywhere online that any books are sold. So.
Great. And before I let you go, I've got a bit of a personal question for you.
Sure.
Do you have a tattoo?
I have 3 tattoos.
What are they?
So on my back, I have a Celtic knot, which was my first tattoo when I was right before I left, right before I moved to California. So I must have been 21 when I got it. And that was kind of a memory. I had gone to Europe when I was 19, and it was my first trip abroad, really. And my father was actually born in Scotland. And so I traveled for the first time around Scotland and then England and Ireland. And that was kind of a trip reminder, kind of both from my Celtic heritage and then also from reminding me of the adventurous part of that, and that I went by myself and that I didn't need help and that I could do these, kind of crazy things. So that's my first one. And then my other two are they're boring. They're my kids' names. Sorry, kids, but that's more boring.
That's awesome. Great. And so where are your kids' names placed?
I have one on each wrist. So the inside of my one wrist is my older son's monogram, actually. And then the other wrist is just my other son's name.
Well, you better not have any more kids because you've run out of wrist.
That was probably why I did it, because I'm a 2-kid kind of mom, to be honest. I'm not the kind of person that would probably do well with having 6 kids or even 3. 2 is perfect for me.
Funny. Is there anything else before I let you go that you'd like to share with the audience, perhaps a tip or an education about food and nutrition or anything at all?
No, I think like I mentioned, just don't get so bogged down in trying to feel like there is one perfect, optimal path for you, to the point where your food and your diet and even your lifestyle choices now become a source of anxiety for you. What I really wish I could impart to everybody that I'm helping to educate is just nobody knows all the answers. And so give yourself permission to not have all the answers, but to just make choices every day that make you feel good.
I love that. That's really good because obviously if you're stressed, then you're not going to digest properly anyway, and it's not going to serve you. So I like that.
Stress is the enemy of health. And so it's so ironic that so many people inject so much stress into their health choices. And it's so counterproductive, and it's so easy to do when there's such information overload nowadays. So I'm just giving everyone permission to take a step back from that information overload and to not have all the answers before making choices.
Excellent. Look, thank you so much for your help, not only on the show today, but just all the education that you're giving to everyone in those Facebook groups.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ali.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review and subscribe.